Caitlin and welcome to the Lit Review. Today we're going to talk about my 5-star predictions. I don't know why this suddenly means 5, that's clearly 10. But we're going to talk about my 5-star predictions today. So I specifically haven't done one of these in a couple of years, in part because I failed massively the last time I tried to predict my own like 5-star system. In part because I kind of don't have an official one. Like, I don't use Cawpile, that I know a lot of people really love, but that's never been something I'm really drawn to. So I don't really talk about it a lot on this channel, but my day job is in research, and that means I do a lot with data and statistics on the daily. So I thought to myself, hey, if I'm gonna try this whole 5-star prediction thing again, let's do it with some data. So one of the ways that that works is I have been really loving using Storygraph. I do still use Goodreads, but I really love Storygraph's stats and the way that they track things. So I was able to go into like my personal chart of 5 stars and look at each of the 5 stars. And because I also support them as like a premium member, they give me even more stats to look at. So I dove deep into my Storygraph to see what I could try to like observe about these 6 books that I rated 5 stars last year. I read 129 books in 2022. I only rated 6 5 stars. That is 4.6%, friends. That is not very many. I'm referencing my little notebook here to see what stats I like recorded or thought would be relevant. And then based on all of the stats that I quote you, I'm gonna try to predict at least 6 books that I might give 5 stars to and see if being data informed actually helps me predict 5-star ratings or not. Let's put it to the test. But according to Storygraph, when they do some of the extra stats, the moods that I was most likely to rate like a 4.5 or above are inspiring, informative, and challenging. And for the record, I use Storygraph's like mood function in the best way I can, because I'm a romance reader. I really don't think the moods in Storygraph speak to romance readers very well. That's like my one gripe with Storygraph as a platform, is I love that they have the like reading moods, but I think as a romance reader, you're kind of just screwed, because the best you've got really is like dark and lighthearted. Like, there's no romantic mood, there's nothing like steamy, spicy, whatever the word is. There's nothing like that really speaks to how I would describe a romance book. So sometimes when I've been reading darker romances, challenging is a word that I will use. I will also use this to describe some nonfiction that really like challenges my beliefs or makes me think a little bit more critically. Same with other fiction works that make me think critically or do things like that. So challenging, I think, is like a good word, or as good as it can get within Storygraph's existing words. I also noticed last year that I tended to like books that felt fast-paced. They could be long, but if they just feel like they're moving, I'm way more invested. I think I've struggled in the past with books that are just like a little slower on the uptake or build. I also think, sidebar, I also think this is why I don't like slow burns. It's because the word slow's in there and it's just like the pace doesn't feel right to my brain chemistry. Anyway, so of the 6 books that I rated 5 stars last year in 2022, here's some of the connections I made. 3 out of those 6 were romances, and that's great news for me because I am trying to read more romance, trying to embrace that as my joy. 1 out of the 6 was nonfiction. 1 out of the 6 was also like a short form, like really tiny, and that's part of why I said in my reading goals video that I do want to try to read some more short form, because I really found an author that I thought did short form really well. 1 out of the 6 was young adult, which I think tracks with my reading in general. Like, it's not my favorite genre to read, but I enjoy it, so it makes sense that at least 1 is young adult. 1 out of the 6, it was a historical as well, and that also makes sense because same with historical, I like it, but it's not my most favoriteest thing that I read all the time. And then 2 of the books, 2 out of the 6, were by the same author, which I will talk about more in a minute. So there were a couple of other things that I could probably connect the dots and make some more guesses, but I think between the moods and the little connections I've made here, this is how I'm going to pick the 6 books that I think will be 5-star reads in 2023. So let's start with my favorite part, the romances. So 3 out of the 6 books I read last year were romances, which means I'm gonna make predictions that, you know, at least 3 more romances will get me there, will get me to the 5-star place. And because 2 of the 6 books were by the same author, Catherine Moon, I'm gonna hedge my bets and say at least 1 book that I give a 5-star rating to this year comes from Catherine Moon. So when I'm looking at Catherine Moon's backlog, and she's an author that I really want to read everything on her backlist, and she's an insta-buy author for me. So she did just have a release, Games with the Orc, that I think is going to be a fun one for me, because I also have learned last year that I like monster romances. Who'da thunk it? The one that I'm gonna shoot my shot with, that I think is gonna be 5-star, because both Baby and Lola are Why Choose novels. And Catherine Moon, I think, does a really good job with Why Choose. I'm gonna choose a book that I don't currently own, but I'm gonna buy it, and that is Good Deeds. I'll put the picture up here. Good Deeds is a Why Choose romance in like a sci-fi setting. So it's a Why Choose with cyborgs and robots. And I think they're like specifically supposed to be pleasure bots. So I think that's gonna be the 5-star winning premise for me. We'll see. So in a similar vein, I'm gonna pick an author that I have given at least one of their books in the past a 5-star rating, and that is Grace Draven. So I showed this off in my book covered book club video recently, but I'm gonna try to read Radiance, and this is the first in, I believe, a completed duology. But Radiance by Grace Draven, this is the special edition cover from Faye Crate, and look at the shiny edges. I've heard so many good things from this from other fellow booktubers and content creators out there, that like it's essentially an enemies to friends, friends to lovers romance, where this human woman and this like, I'm not really sure if Fae is the right descriptor. It says on the back that he's the prince of the Kai, so this Kai people, and they are kind of in an arranged marriage, so it's also got that trope in there. And the thing is, like, they both are repulsed by each other, like personally, culturally. They're cultures that have been at war for a really long time, and so they're supposed to bring peace with their union, but they're also like not into each other initially, which is why it becomes enemies to friends, because then they're like, okay, let's just learn to live together, and then they end up kind of falling for each other across the terms of the duet. So I'm really looking forward to this. I really have enjoyed how Grace Draven does romantic fantasy or romantasy. So I think she's a good candidate for this in general, though I will say some of her Fallen Empire books have not been it. Her last one that she released in 2022, it was fine. It was a 3-star. I was happy to have finished the Fallen Empire trilogy, but it just didn't hit the same as Phoenix Unbound and Dragon Unleashed, you know? So again, I just want to say that like no author for me is ever like a untouchable, they're perfect, they can do no wrong kind of author. So there's a chance that this could go awry, but I'm hopeful. It's also one of the prettiest books in my collection, so there is that. So the third and final romance in this list of 6 is going to be one that I pulled from my priority shelf back here. So if it looks like it's been rifled through, it's because it was. So my third and final prediction is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. So I said again in that goals video that I want to read more Kennedy Ryan, because when I read Real by Kennedy Ryan like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I don't know. I loved it. It was fantastic. Before I Let Go is kind of a second chance romance. It's a dual POV book as well, which I typically really love. So this stars Yasmin and Josiah as our 2 leads. They're a divorced couple who are just coming out of like a really difficult time in their lives, but they still co-parent, they still work together. So they're constantly in proximity, even though it's not like forced proximity as a trope. And they kind of start to rekindle a little bit and wonder like, hey, were we too hasty in our end? And obviously there's a lot of like emotional content that goes into this as well. So I actually think this is gonna hit the like challenging mood for me a little bit, potentially even inspiring, because I think sometimes like really emotional reads can kind of check that inspiring box for me. The other book I pulled from my priority shelf that I think could be a 5-star prediction is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. This is YA, and that's kind of the slot that it's filling in my prediction. It's also really intriguing to me because it's native voices as well as kind of like a crime thriller. And I know that this was pretty popular for a lot of folks who read it right after it first released. I tend to hold off on popular releases more frequently than not. So I think I'm ready to give this a go. And also just really love like the inside jacket, the bottom little paragraph here says, Firekeeper's Daughter is an electrifying thriller layered with a rich exploration of the modern Native experience, a reckoning of current and historical injustices, and a powerful celebration of community. So I think this could hit some of the moods that I called out, like challenging, definitely, probably inspiring, maybe a little informative. This is what I think might be my YA pick for my 5-star predictions. Then I have another book that I know I own. I know I own it. I just don't know where it is. So right now, my bookshelves outside of the priority shelf, they're unpacked, but they're not well organized because my goal is to, you know, get new shelves, do the whole new thing. So I haven't really invested a lot of time and energy into perfectly organizing my bookshelves. They're kind of just roughly organized by genre right now. So there are some books where I'm like, yeah, that'd be nice if I could read them, but I don't know where they are. And this is one of those, so I will read it when I find it. And that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a really thin book. It's not quite a novella, but it is shorter. So I think that'll fit for my like 1 out of 6 was short. Also, 1 out of the 6, I didn't mention this earlier, was a classic or like written by an author who is part of classic canon, Edith Wharton. So I think S.T. Gibson, while not a classic author, is riffing off of a classic book, Dracula, because A Dowry of Blood is basically a LGBT plus story about Dracula's wives, which on premise alone sounds freaking fantastic. And so I think it's not quite a classic, but it is gonna hit some of that vibes, and it will also kind of work for historical as well. And this last one is kind of my ringer. I'd read a chunk of it through ebook a couple of years ago from my library, and then it was due and I had to return it and then just never checked it out again. But I did buy a physical copy of the book. So I'm just gonna start fresh from the beginning. I think I got through like less than a third of it previously, so I don't feel like I could have rated it at the time. But I know that this is a challenging read. I know that this will be an inspiring read for me, and that is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is the memoir of Chanel Miller, and specifically as it relates to her horrifying experience with Brock Turner, her assault, and the media blitz around it. What I read before I had to return it had a profound impact on me, and that was just the beginning of her story. Chanel Miller is a powerful writer, and not just because of her very distressing lived experience, but she's a very gifted writer. And so I would like to read this. I think this is going to be a 5-star read for me. I think it is going to be a difficult read for me. So I really have to pick and choose my moment for when I'm willing to sit with this. But I do think nonfiction that I have to choose the moment to sit with it tends to resonate with me really well because I've chosen my moment. I also might try the audiobook because I think with nonfiction, I have a tendency to actually rate it higher if I listen to the audiobook if the person who wrote it is narrating, because it just gives so much more depth to the experience. So these are 4 of the 6 books. The other 2 I will manifest at a different date. I'm hoping that this is a better yield for me of 5-star books because I'm doing it with data and we'll see how that actually turns out for me. I feel pretty good about it though as a stack. Like I think the last time I did a 5-star prediction video, I was kind of just like randomly shooting my shot and being like, I could like it, but I feel like I've actually given it more thought this time around, and that might actually work. Who knew? Giving some things more thought would be helpful. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope you have a fantastic reading day or night, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Hold on, girl, now wait just a minute. I've got something to say. You should hear it all. to make time for your feelings, but you have to admit